Remember, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. So in the UK, particularly in England, that's a well-known rhyme. It goes back a long way. I don't know what the exact origins of the rhyme are, but it refers to an important historic event in this country's history called the Gunpowder Plot. It's particularly important in England, but I would argue also for the wider UK. Um, so basically, a little bit of a fill in with that one for those who don't know, for any international viewers. Um, Bonfire Nights, as we now know it, or Guy Fawkes Night, I'll come to that, refers to a plot in 1605 against the fairly new king. He'd only been on the throne for 2 years at that point. King James the First of England, King James the Sixth of Scotland. It was a dual monarchy, or rather a union of the crowns, our first major act of union in this country, but it was a union of the crowns, not the parliaments. So he was simultaneously King of England and King of Scotland, but under different realms technically at that point. The parliaments unified later. Anyway, important king. A lot of things happened on his watch. The Mayflower went to America. There were infamous witch trials. The King James Bible was devised. The Jacobean era brought great culture and arts, a continuation of Shakespeare's works. So it was an important period of history, I think. Um, Anyway, this group of young Catholic rebels basically felt the king wasn't radical enough. They felt that he wasn't doing enough to protect Catholics. And there was a lot of other factors there, but this isn't a history video, I'm just giving the basics. Anyway, suffice to say, they decided that the only course was to assassinate James, and they were going to blow up Parliament in the process. Now, Parliament at that time was a large wooden building, not the stone building, the Victorian stone building we have today. It was a large wooden building. And a few years ago, Hammond from, forget the guy's first name because I don't watch the show, but Mr. Hammond from Top Gear done an experiment um, in which they simulated what the 17th century wooden parliament would have looked like, and had it been blown up, what would have happened? Well, the king would have been killed outright, but also scores of MPs, and also a lot of Londoners around the vicinity, because that part of London is densely populated. It was then, it is now, and there would have been mass casualties, possibly several hundred people, plus many, many injuries. Effectively, we would have been talking about a large scale terrorist attack. And, there's no question about it. That's what it would have been. Because this wasn't just the assassination of the king, this would have been many other casualties as well. So, unquestionably, by today's standards, or by any standards, it would have been a terrorist attack. So, the 5th of November is a date that's, notwithstanding the slight change in the Julian calendar, or yeah, it's basically the dates in which we remember this event. Now, I've never been quite clear whether we're remembering the failure of the plot or the plot itself. It's never been entirely clear. Guess it depends on your perspective. It's an old tradition in England, specifically, where people would have bonfires on this night. They'd have a penny for the guy, which was, I forget how exactly that worked. It was something about, I think it was children, something similar to trick or treat, but I could be wrong about that. I know some places like Lewis in East Sussex has a celebrity mannequin, a particularly popular public figure that they put on the pyre, which is slightly controversial. Um, but basically, we have fireworks as well. Just a quick thing, by the way, the plot got uncovered because what had happened was a hired hand, Guy Fawkes, he wasn't actually the leader. A man called William Catesby was the leader, but Guy Fawkes was discovered in the cellars of the Houses of Parliament. Now, they were careful about it. They tried to imply that they were just merchants. But this was coupled with a letter that was sent to one of the MPs, now known as the Mount Eagle letter. And in that letter, it was basically warning the member in question to stay away from Parliament on that date. The member went to the King, or somehow the letter made its way to the King and the plot was uncovered. So some of those, including William Catesby, I believe, were killed in a firefight in a barn in the countryside. The remainder were tortured and brutally executed for high treason, hung, drawn, and quartered. Anyway, that's a grisly history of the Gunpowder Plot, but it's an important event in English history. But fireworks, I want to raise the question of, are fireworks a good thing or not? Now, I must admit I've always liked fireworks. I think they're aesthetically beautiful when done properly. Um, I like all sorts of fireworks. I like the big ones. I like Catherine wheels. I like fireworks. But I do appreciate the concerns around them. I saw a post on Facebook and it basically showed a veteran and some dogs, and it should please be considerate. The dogs, sensitive hearing, and veterans who may be suffering from PTSD, it could trigger them for obvious reasons. If they've been on the front line, maybe they've experienced explosions. And actually, not just veterans, maybe a firefighter who's had that situation, or even a civilian who's been in a road accident or something else involving a loud explosion, perhaps an industrial accident. Um, but I wouldn't necessarily advocate a complete ban because the problem with that is, well, then do you ban everything that makes a loud noise? Do you ban someone cutting the hedge? Do you ban, roadworks? Um, I would advocate, though, maybe stricter control, somehow making it that it's only Halloween, Guy Fawkes Night, and New Year's Eve, the three dates that really where fireworks are supposed to be. Um, but then again, businesses would argue that's restrictive on their sales. Um, my own family, we did get private fireworks, but it's been a few years now. I was always the safety conscious one. I'd always have a bucket of water to put the charred remains in afterwards. Um, but I do think there's a case now for maybe making them only in public displays. And I've even heard of fireworks without a sound. It's probably like those so-called guns that have a blanker on them or a silencer. They're not totally silent; they still make a sound. It's just it's a little bit more muted, probably something like that. But I mean, take for example the thing about dogs being sensitive. Well, that's very true. But what if you reverse it and say, well, someone who's been mauled by a dog, what if they say all dogs should be banned? As I've made clear on this channel, I absolutely support the ban on Bully XL dogs because that's more specific. That breed is far, far more dangerous than others, and I totally support the ban for the reasons I said. Um, but it shouldn't be a case of if there's one problem and something's just banned outright. It should be if it really, really mounts into a specific problem. Now, with fireworks, for the issues I mentioned, dogs being sensitive and veterans, I think people should be sensitive. They should be considerate. And as I see it, the problem we have where that doesn't happen is antisocial behaviour. You get yobs who will use fireworks not for the purpose of meant for entertainment, for basically weapons, for you know vandalism, for all sorts of things. I think generally there should be much tougher penalties for antisocial behaviour. I don't think it's trivial. At its worst, it can ruin lives. It can drive people out of their homes. It can really, really degrade the quality of life. So I think there should be much tougher penalties for antisocial behaviour. Um, More broadly, um, but yeah, just let me know what you think of fireworks. Good idea, bad idea. Do you enjoy them? Do you watch them? Do you think they should be banned? Do you think they should only be partially restricted? What's your thoughts? Basically, in conclusion, I would not advocate a total ban. I think I'm for public displays if they're well organized, if they're not too expensive, if they're well organized, especially at New Year's Eve. I wouldn't advocate a total ban because this is an old tradition, and when done properly, it can be a beautiful thing. And their primary purpose is entertainment, but certainly more use of silent fireworks if that's what they do, and definitely more consideration. I mean, I certainly wouldn't let them off near, if I knew someone was maybe a veteran. Um, but I don't think a whole culture should change for the sake of people's pets. I think it should just be more considerate. But I wouldn't advocate a total ban. I don't think that would be workable. But it should be maybe more restricted and maybe more in just public displays and privately just maybe sparklers. Let me know your thoughts on that issue. So fireworks, yeah or nay?